So thanks to our panel. These have been chosen because they are the ultimate experts who are able to solve this problem for the industry and draw all the conclusions together. Is that right? We'll give it a go. So I got one or two introductory questions, and then if you want to follow on any of those discussions, just raise your hand and we will include you as well. So I'm just going to start with someone who's not spoken today, Jeroen, and just to explain a little bit, we've had mention of FSI today, but we have not really discussed what it is. But if you wouldn't mind just explaining briefly what FSI is, and also how you might look at addressing the issue of plastics within FSI.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Good afternoon, everyone. FSI, I think when talking about FSI, we have to go back to 2013 when it was founded. And it was founded by a multitude of stakeholders in the industry, realizing that the term sustainability at the time was rather vague. There were a lot of certifications that were not really clear. Every now and then, especially the weeks before Valentine's and Mother's Day, there were some nasty campaigns hammering everybody. And if you don't have an agenda, what can you answer? And this is where this group came together and they said, okay, let's work together, make this a market-driven initiative. At the time, 18 organizations joined. Now it's more than 50, covering the whole supply chain and also do it in a multi-stakeholder way. So not only the good guys or not only the bad guys, but just let's sit together and see if we can solve these issues that we are facing together. And the basis of that is to do it in a pre-competitive way. And also that means that you have to set aside your own agenda from time to time, and which is, well, was challenging at the beginning. But when we started to do projects, it became rather fun to see people starting to create their own networks within FSI. So, and I think that was good. And the learning also from this maybe the plastic topic today, for me was also there you see it's complex, there is no single answer. There are multiple systems functioning next to each other. It's regional based, it's a global issue, but you have regional solutions. So by all means, get together and start somewhere. And address the issues that are about recycling, about reusing, but also about refusing, because that will also help, I think, in a way. And some of the speakers today told a little bit about some of the advancements made on this topic. And what you see there was that it was governments leading the way with legislation. And I think that is what you should always avoid. So if you are able, as a multi-stakeholder group, to start working together on your projects, on the topics, you can avoid legislation. And well, that's something that I also hope you will take with you. By all means, start somewhere and share the results. Also awarding, certifying, and also champions the ones that do well. So I think that's would be my big takeaway from this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll just move to Piet. Briet, you're responsible for this area within Royal FloraHolland. Maybe you could just share your perspective on it, and also how you think the auction and the industry here in the Netherlands will be talking about plastics in 5 years' time. I didn't warn any of you about these questions, so...
No, and I didn't warn you on my answer. But anyway, hello, good afternoon. Sustainability manager at Royal FloraHolland, and one of my themes is packaging in general, and therefore also plastic packaging. By the way, I brush my teeth with a bamboo toothbrush, and my swimming trunks are made out of 8 plastic bottles. Just to answer you from Popperman. I know you're all with me here, right? Okay, good. So actually, currently we are kind of betting on 2 horses. So one horse is on efficiency, is doing less bad. We are trying to do less bad. Recycling as much as possible, sometimes ending in downcycling, but preventing from recovery, energy, the last resort. So doing less bad, efficiency. The other horse we are betting on is effectiveness, doing good. Meaning not extracting scarce materials, not emitting CO2 related to those scarce materials, but doing good straight away. So extracting natural materials which we can reuse and otherwise recycle or remanufacture as many times as needed for a purpose, for a different purpose, anyway, for the purpose which will feed as much value to it as possible. So 5 years from now, coming back to your question, we will have more or less come to the results of the Plastic Pact, earlier stated by Wyme. And yeah, you're still awake, I know, it's Tuesday afternoon. So we will have reached all those 4 goals. The Plastic Pact is a very good thing. It's a collaboration of 75 organizations, so that as such is already positive. On the same side, it is on improving the use of single-use plastic. So it's a lot of times about the efficiency and not about the effectiveness, doing good straight away. So the 35% at the bottom, you saw, that's the good thing. That's doing directly good. Taking materials used early on, could be from the biosphere, and adding them into the new sphere.
Okay.
More or less an answer to your question?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm going to ask David now, a little bit about, with your knowledge of our sector and other sectors, whether you feel there are other sectors that we should be talking to or we could learn from, and what as a sector we should be doing together to address this issue more.
Yeah, I mean, I think today's been a very heartening event, and it's been interesting just to hear about the energy, the dynamism, the sense of innovation that's going on, you know, and obviously we're a select crowd, if you like. Obviously the people who turn up are the ones who are converted or keen to be converted, but there's clearly some very significant initiatives going on, and what's also interesting as well is to hear about the broader institutional terrain, you know, some of the policies that are being enacted, you know, whether through government or actually through industry, you know, subsectors of the industry as well, all of which are driving things in the right kind of direction. And I think, yeah, I mean, what can be done? I mean, I think the key things come down to collaboration, because what's really come across today is there are so many areas of expertise required to tackle these problems, and they can't really be, you know, if any one business says, oh, we're just going to solve it ourselves, well, they're just not going to, because you need to know so much about the technical, about the policy, about consumers, about so many different angles. So I think things that need to come out of these kind of events is a sense of, you know, joined up thinking, collaborations, you know, hopefully some particular, you know, new collaborations will form just from the people meeting in this group, you know, today. You know, some people have come to talk to me, and I hope we'll be able to get some, you know, research going that involves industry, academia, and so forth. And hope to have words with Charlie later, and maybe even look at going across the pond and establishing a first Brexit partnership, perhaps, or something like that. Something positive has to happen out of that one. What can be learned from other sectors? That's a very good question. You know, I mean, I can't say that I'm expert enough in too many other sectors to better comment, but I mean, things are happening within other sectors, obviously within, you know, as mentioned earlier, in some of the, you know, the furniture sector and so forth. People have had to think about, you know, sourcing of sustainable wood for some time, for example. You know, that's one particular area. But I think, you know, you guys are probably not in a bad position in relation to many other sectors as a whole, to be honest. But maybe that is driven because you're so rooted in the land, so rooted in the landscape. You know, you depend on it. It's something that's part of who you are. And I'm sure everybody here has got some kind of personal roots back into, you know, land-based production and things, which just gives you that greater sense and desire. And certainly the people I know in South Africa are working in the sustainability fields. You know, there's always that sense of something bigger than just doing it because it's their job or because it's a target they need to achieve. You know, it is a much bigger agenda. So I'd say the critical thing is just to keep the energy going, keep the information sharing, ask difficult questions of each other and listen to difficult answers, listen to things you don't want to hear because that's all part of the process. Be prepared to be wrong. Because I'm afraid history always will show up, particularly with a lot of the sustainability stuff, things that sounded really good 20 years ago, we suddenly discover actually end up having reverse impacts. Making more energy efficient housing apparently has actually just one impact has been that people tend to just spend money on other things that are less sustainable. There's all kinds of studies like that that are counterintuitive, if you like. So you've got to look at, it's very much about systems analysis. But but the key message I would say is keep up the collaboration and look at routes for multi-stakeholder initiatives to drive things forward.
Thank you. Charlie, yeah.
You think the produce sector is ahead of the ornamental sector in this regard?
I honestly couldn't tell you. From what I've heard today, the ornamental sector seems to be doing some very interesting things, and I think also maybe the fact that the ornamental sector quite often is closer to market, that may also assist. When you're thinking about some of the controversial carbon footprinting issues. But I think the two sectors certainly need to learn from one another and not think of each other as being separate. You're all part of the same broad industry, and it's vital to take that route and to learn from each other, I think.
While we're talking about collaboration, question for Elise, who is looking at a project working with other companies. How do you find you're able to engage with the manufacturers on this issue? So we've heard from manufacturers today, and you're coming at it as a customer really of that. To what extent do you think you will be involving manufacturers in these projects you're doing?
No, definitely they're a large part of this project. As the manufacturers, we need to supply those products. So we need to use their innovation and their creativity to use the information and all the knowledge we will gain, hopefully, with the project. And then they can supply us with the products conform those requirements. So definitely we need the suppliers and we need their knowledge. So yeah, sure. We need them. Yeah. And if I'm talking about really Lemkes, then we have a very broad management on our suppliers, even the plant producers, and we work really hard together. And at the moment we are really busy creating a sustainable purchasing system. So what do you really want to achieve with your producers? And that's based on different kind of topics, and it could be pesticides, but it could be plastics as well. We are definitely very strongly in relation with our suppliers, and not only the pots or the plants, but even our transporters. We do have every year a meeting with our transporters, and there's always a workshop on sustainability and quality. So even with our transporters, we having an annual discussion on how could we improve on sustainability.
Okay, thank you. Well, Peter has flown over a lot of sea and therefore presumably a lot of plastic to get here, so from Australia. So you're going to have a comment on that.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Peter Vaughan, Nursery and Garden Industry Australia. I did look at taking the route of getting a train and then a boat and canoed for a while and swam in nylon togs. But I would have had to have left 4 weeks ago, so it would have taken maybe even a little bit longer. I just wanted to address that issue on suppliers of plastics across the industry. From an Australian point of view, we have one significant pot supplier who work very closely with Sven at Poppelman. They supply over 80% of the plastic pots and trays used across the industry. And so they have a very strong monopolistic position in what they do in the supply of those pots. They are very mindful of the use of pots, how they're used, and talking of the 3 R's of that David mentioned earlier, they're certainly looking at how to recycle and reuse. And I know out of here and working with Sven, they're looking at how to do the renewal as well. So from a supply side, there's one dominant player, and we work very closely with them to address these issues.
Okay, thank you. Charlie?
Yeah, let me just add on to that, is that really I think it's the manufacturers that are leading the cause. I think they are in the forefront, and when I look at manufacturers and how they conduct their business today relative to when I was a little tyke in the nursery business, it's markedly different. And it used to be it was all push marketing, would develop the new best product, and we're going to push it on the industry. But when I'm asked to speak at a lot of places around the world, but I get asked by manufacturers to come in and talk about consumer behavior, to talk about the economy and other issues, but I get more requests for consumer behavior information from manufacturers. That tells me that they're considering the demand side of the equation and not simply the supply side of the equation, and they're trying to ascertain what is going to be the next best product to satisfy and delight that customer across the manufacturing sector. It doesn't matter which sector you're talking about, whether it be peat, whether it be containers, fertilizers, pest control products. I think that holds true for the entire manufacturing sector. And so I just applaud that sector for carrying the day in terms of seeing the demand side aspects and trying to adjust the winds of the sail accordingly.
Thank you. Do I have some questions from the floor for the panel? From Chiridis from Ethiopia.
Thank you very much, Tim, and the presentations from the morning till afternoon. The panelists, it's very much interesting. I do have lots of takeaways to take, but I was contemplating, as somebody who comes from Africa, how we are going to translate these sustainability discussions. You are in the context of a developed world. There is priority for development, for creating jobs, for feeding people and the like. So I would wish to have your reflection on these things. Is it possible to integrate in the context of Africa with the European context and the US context and the like? Is my question clear?
Yeah.
Good.
Who would like to have a go at answering that? Jeroen.
Maybe a little heads up, but I think rather than looking at production locations where you always have to look at specific solutions, you should address it from a supply chain perspective. So, and then obviously, of course, when you look at footprinting, Africa has a different footprint than a grower in the Netherlands or in Germany. But if you look at it from a whole value chain perspective, then it gives you also different solutions. So you will have a different footprint for sure in Africa than you will have in Asia or in South America because of the abundance of water or the lack of water. So, but it gives you, and that is what I took also from the presentation, the last presentation from you, is that there are not so many factors that will influence it. So they will be different, but at least you will pick out one or two that you will be able to focus on. And if you do it in the supply chain, I think then you are able to come up with solutions. And the second thing is, and that's why I always also think it's really important to address it in the supply chain, is that if you address it from the manufacturer side, or as we speak about, we have about growers and farmers, it's very tempting to push all the problems towards the growers, that they should solve it. And that's when I think where the industry has to also respect and come up with a respectful approach to them as well, to not only say what has to be done better, but also show their commitment in improving practice and then also buying from these people in their supply chain. So these two things, I think, would be my takeaway on that.
Okay. Does that answer your question? Yeah, okay. Thank you. Victor, here. There's a mic coming. It's only on the video. You won't be heard. So, yeah, to Victor.
Thank you. Victor from Canada. Question regarding plastics and where they stand in the public trust spectrum. Meaning, back to Dr. Hall's presentation when he talked about straws. Straws went from being an accepted issue to something that is not wanted. In my household, We don't have plastic straws anymore. We ordered metal straws, apparently, from Amazon to use it now. I've been told by my kids and my wife. So we banned plastic straws. So where does the plastic pots and containers stand in the public trust spectrum compared to neonics, pesticides, fertilizer, sphagnum peat moss as an example, and an even further dynamic to that? I was recently in South Africa. They don't use plastic pots. They use plastic bags. I'm not sure if that's any better or worse, but I just thought I would ask that because public trust is really the issue it comes down to. Because at the end of the day, a lot of what we're doing is just for sustainability, but also on how it reflects on the purchasing and the people's view of our industry.
Is that addressed to anyone particular?
The panel.
At the panel. Anyone like to respond on that? Okay, Peter.
Tim, I'll talk first. We had a bit of a contradiction on the plastic bags at a major supermarket, in that they said we're going to phase out single-use plastic bags, and at the same time they did that, they bought in plastic collectibles for the shoppers to purchase for their kids. So on one hand they were getting rid of the plastic bags, but then actively encouraging them to collect these plastic collectibles. So, and that I know caused some concerns from a public perception point of view across Australia. Talking more about the plastic pots in the nursery industry, I think the issues that you raised at the top of the list, the use of chemicals, neonicotinoids and glyphosate, high on the list. Use of water, because water use efficiency in Australia is very important. Power and how to generate energy for use in nurseries as well. And I think, but within the mix is certainly the sustainability and use of plastic pots. And recently in Australia, there's been a government regulation where that has actually come into legislation now, where there's an organisation called the Australian Packaging Covenant Organisation, that any business that turns over more than $5 million must do something about recycling their packaging. So it's a new regulation that's recently come into Australia.
Okay, thank you. Charlie, yeah, go ahead.
Let me just tag on there. When I was doing my biodegradable container study, you'll notice that there wasn't a discount that was commanded for a plant being in a plastic pot. That was not evident. So I think that there's not the hypersensitivity yet. But who would have thought there would ever been hypersensitivity to Roundup or the use of various pesticides in Canada? I mean, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And I think, for example, go back to the produce. You may remember in 1989, Alar was introduced, a growth regulator on apples. Well, there was more carcinogenic potential in a six-pack of beer than there was a 50-pound sack of apples dipped 50 times in a vat of Alar, and you ate the whole 50-pound sack. But it was perception. It was perception that was reality. And then you had the world-renowned toxicologist, you know who I'm talking about, Meryl Streep, who was on television, washing her fruits and veggies in dishwashing detergent, which underwent no carcinogenic testing, but it was perception. It cost the apple industry $275 million in a matter of 2 weeks because mamas stopped feeding the apples to kids and applesauce to kids and so forth. And so you had Mothers Against Drunk Driving. You had Mothers Against Apples there for a while. So it's all about perception. And all the hypersensitivity that we see as far as the use of chemicals and the use of how our products are made and that transparency that's being demanded on the produce sector, I think that same level of transparency is coming to ornamentals, but we're not seeing it now, and we think we're in the safe zone. But again, I think it's not if, I think it's a matter of when. So that transparency's got to be there, and we have to prove our sustainability. Not that we have to use alternative means, but just the means that we're using are sustainable. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'd like to say something to that as well. I think it's really country and culture related, which topic is the most important to address. But all will come. I agree with you, John. And I think as well, the social media has a really, really large impact. So as as soon as something, like you said, Mr. Apples, comes into social media, and we see that with plastics as well, and we see that with neonics or all those topics, as soon as there's a lot of media and publications about it, then all of a sudden all the retailers start up and make policies and they start asking questions to us. Jose is nodding now, and this is really true. If there is one Greenpeace research on neonics, then we already know that a couple of weeks later we will receive from all our retailers a letter with this is the restrictions, this is our policy, this is just to back themselves up. So yeah, this is really social media related as well.
Okay, so
just one. And it becomes scary if you don't, as a sector, or even as an individual company, if you do not have an agenda addressing this. And it doesn't mean that when you have an agenda that you know all the answers, but when you are under fire from an NGO and he will attack you on something, then at least your first reply is not a no, but it can be a yes. I am aware, we are aware, and we're working towards a solution, and we've put this and this in place. And I think that's so important in addressing these things.
okay, thank you. Jack, over there.
I would like to comment on what Elise just mentioned. A lot of growers are really going out of their way to being sustainable, but how do they support their claim to being sustainable? There are a lot of certificates out there, retailers imposing new claims or new demands on their suppliers whenever there's a report, as you said. Some certificates are even contradicting each other. So how, if a grower asks me, what should I do? What answer can I give to them?
To me, oh, okay, I'm going to. Yeah, okay, it's fine. I know this is a struggle, and I do understand the question. I like the question. What I always say, really look at your customers. So really look towards the retailers where you are supplying to, and already be a bit ahead and look forward. What are the policies on other items as well? If you're supplying to a supermarket and you know their policy on produce, on fruit and vegetables, then you know already within a couple of years this will be for the ornamentals as well. So you can be ahead a little bit. And sometimes time flies, and then the ornamentals have to speed up really in comparison to the produce. But definitely look ahead and look really in your supply chains, and even make decisions. And make decision, this retailer is maybe not my retailer, and this retailer will be my retailer, and tailor made your produce towards that retailer. That's my suggestion.
What would you suggest to growers that are not supplying retailers, but smaller flower shops? Because I understand I know it's not your customer base. I'm quite aware of that. But a lot of growers are not supplying the big retail companies, but the specialized flower shops, mostly smaller growers with specialized crops. What would their course of action be?
That's a good question. We don't supply to those kind of supply chains, but I would say then look into social media and look into society, what is happening. So, for instance, if you do see that there is a big discussion about pesticides and on plastics, try to look around for certificates or proof that you that you follow the stream where it's going to. And still, if you want to know, you are selling your products, so still try to get in contact with your customer. Even when it's a small florist on the corner of the street. Maybe just go and visit in a couple of countries some corner stores and ask them. Or maybe talk to Sylvie, maybe she knows more about it from florists. Just try to find your network, how you do get the information where you need to look forward to.
Peter? In Australia, we have a best management practice quality assurance scheme that a number of our production nurseries do use. Its focuses more on production, so around chemical use, water use, and all input use. There's nothing specific on plastic use at this stage, but potentially, with what is happening around the globe, there could be a module put into it on use of plastics. And the way that we see it being positioned a bit at the moment is that it's providing that social licence to operate, and it might go back to the question earlier around what is the public perception of what you're doing in the industry. We have a number of supply chains we supply into, from the independent retailers or the hardware chains. They don't have a demand on that yet, but in production horticulture, we're finding it more in that they want true to type, disease-tested material coming through the supply chain, so they will look at plants coming out of those quality assurance schemes.
Okay, thank you. Well, the final question just here. Sorry, Audrey. I think we have to...
Hi, thank you. Thank you for joining this conference. My name is Kees Wakke from Des Plantpak. Everything is going so fast last years. More than 40 years we are producer of plastic pots from recycled material. Since the end of the 90s, we are producer of biodegradable pots. Within a year, we launched 3 new brands for the pots, etc. From biodegradable in soil till post-consumer material pots, etc. We are doing our best as most other producers also do. But what are the waste processors doing? Are they also making steps for waste processing? I heard about uniform recycling. There's no way that the European Union is doing something about it. More universal recycling. It will help us very much.
Nobody wants to.
Okay. I'm not from a recycling company, of course, but I do agree with you. If we have a bit more uniformity in recycling methods, that would really help. And maybe we can put up a lobby all together and see if we can get somewhere. What do you think, Charlie?
A brief response is that, as an example, in the Plastic Pact, it is one of the goals to have 70% of the packages recycled by 2025. And that the municipalities in Holland, many of the municipalities have a stake, or for 100% stake in the waste companies. That 70% is not only related to the ones who use the plastics, but it's also related to the waste companies to make it possible to be recycled. So they're working on that. I don't have a stake in those companies. So.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Was there anything the members of the panel wanted to say before we close? No? Okay. I would like to thank our panel very much for taking these questions. I think it's clear that we've all established well today that this is an issue that does need addressing, an issue that is clear and is well on the agenda now. But we've also, it's clear to see it is very complicated, yes? We have established that. Bernard sometimes says you can still be confused, but on a higher level, yes? So that maybe can be it. But so we are still, we can see there's not one solution, but there is a need to, it seems very clear, to engage the whole supply chain within this. That means including consumers, the way that they use things. It means involving retailers, involving growers, traders, and manufacturers throughout. And I think it's good to see projects which are happening in elements of that. So you have Elise and Jose's project looking at building that solution. You have the UK project bringing 2 aspects of the supply chain together. And we have other examples that we've considered today. But I suspect there's probably still a need for something that brings the broader chain together, that pulls in the retailers in a way that is designed to bring real solutions that are practical and can be implemented. And I think everyone can recognise the issue that Charlie explained when he went and spoke to the retailers and nothing happened. So it's all about the issues of social media. I think we all know that tomorrow this could be not just important news, but headline news over something that we don't know is going to happen. And as an industry, we need to be ready for that. So the kind of initiatives like FSI, which is helping the industry to tackle sustainability issues, may be a mechanism for developing collaboration within the sector for tackling this issue further. And maybe that's something for you to consider. The major players in the industry, as we have spoken to today, bringing together to find solutions. The work of Royal FloraHolland, the link with government, everything, and everyone is doing something, and it's about how we find those solutions together. The initiatives are coming from the manufacturers, from recyclers, and there's some great ideas. Entrepreneurs are coming in to fill the gap. There is new technologies, there is things linked together, but it's different in different countries. Sure, there's no one size is going to fit everyone, but at the same time, there are going to be some common threads which pull this industry together in tackling this issue. And I'm sure that through AIPH, we're working with FSI, with others, in working internationally too, we can look to address this. We saw the need to find solutions that involve refusing earlier, reducing, reusing, recycling. All of those are options, and all of them are right in certain circumstances. And it's how we find those right places to slot them. I hope that you found it stimulating today. You haven't all gone home with the magic solution, I don't think, to go and sort everything out, but at least it has raised the profile of the issues. It has given you an awareness of what is going on, and I think it is making all of us to look and to see more closely at what we are doing and how we can collaborate with our peers and others in the supply chain to find the solutions, to ensure that we are doing what is right for our industry, what is right for the environment, what is sustainable, and what ensures we are resilient for the future in the light of all these things that will happen. And I wonder if we have this conference in 5 years' time, what we will be talking about then. Maybe we should put it in a diary and see what has happened. But thank you all, and all of you, for participating today. You've all been a real strong part of everything that has happened. Thank you very much to all of our speakers. Thank you to Vanessa and her team who have managed to organise it and put it all together and helped it to run so smoothly. Audrey too, who has liaised with the speakers, and to all of our speakers especially. So thank you very much.